Dan, can you take it away again and talk to us more about the next promo sets?
Absolutely. The next one on our list is the Starter Deck 2. Decipher released these, and to be honest, I'm not entirely sure why they chose to release these. They do have an updated rulebook. They've got 60 white border cards, and they've got 8 fixed black border cards. Those fixed black border cards included a Ferengi outpost and a bunch of missions and a couple of, or just one event card that would let you play with whatever you had in here. Perhaps badly, but it was another attempt at giving you a starter deck that was playable. From a collector's perspective, these are these have been very cheap and very easy to find, and not particularly desirable until about 1.5 years ago, when someone pointed out to a bunch of us that the fixed promo cards inside of here were printed at 2 different times. So there are 1998 dated cards and 2000 dated cards. And from a survey of something approximately 300 or 400 boxes that we had sealed amongst all of us that we've asked, all of the boxes are dated 1998. So you can't tell until you open them. Tom?
Yeah, so this is, you can obviously acquire, just like the original starter decks, a box of 12 of the 1998 dated cards. It's not bad value in that you do get the 2 rares, just like an original starter box. And as Dan mentioned, you get the fixed cards. So for a time, the value of those 2 rares and those fixed cards were actually greater than the cost of buying a box. So it was actually a way to get some cards that way. But something, and this is somewhat anecdotal, but if you want to try and get the 2000 dated cards, they're about 4 times the price in cost as opposed to the 1998 cards. You can only really get the 2000 dated cards from second anthology boxes and All Good Things boxes. But there is a quirk I believe I found with the second anthology box. As you can see behind Dan, he has a second anthology box right there. And when you get them sealed, there are 2 different types of cellophane wrapping around these second anthology boxes. If you have the completely clear cellophane wrap around the outside, then the starter deck 2 boxes inside, in my experience, contain the 1998 dated cards. And if you have the cellophane wrap, which has the word Decipher, much like many of the other sealed Decipher wraps quite commonly have around the outside, then the cards inside the sealed starter deck 2 boxes inside will be from the 2000 date. I've done this experiment 4 times so far. So I had 2 of the clear wrap and 2 of the Decipher printed wrap. So far it's been consistent. That's not enough for me to state that it is a truism, but it's something that we, especially in the comments, love to hear from you if you've had a similar experience or noticed that same thing, because I think I found a trend there. And it's something that when I'm looking to buy a second anthology box, that's something I really look for now, is the status of the cellophane wrapping.
Yep, please tell us in the comments if you've either confirmed that or you can prove it otherwise. We'd love to hear it. Do you see these cards at all, Johannes?
To be honest, no. There are 2 missions that see some play. The Study Cometry Cloud is quite useful. Especially since it has the Ferengi icon, and many of these missions here now have Ferengi icons, so that gave them a little bit of a starting point. The other one is Search for Weapons, which is fairly easy to solve. It is universal, and it is in a region, meaning you can put lots of these next to each other. And I've seen decks that run 4 of these or 5 of these for a complete planet deck, and you need the same mission set for each of them. So you should have fairly good redundancy. And what you said, it is another take on the, we give you a starter deck and we make sure you can play with these cards. And I think they maybe wanted to minimize what you need here. So you have the Ferengi trading post that specifically says you may report everything there. And then you have the memory wipe event, which had 2 lines or 2 functions. And the first one was more or less the mandatory effect when you played starter deck 2 versus starter deck 2. So both players had to seed this, and it then allowed the other players' cards to mix and interact regardless of affiliation. So that was a special game environment that was set up here. Memory wipe actually has a useful second function, and this is the one that actually you can occasionally see. It plays on a non-Borg ship, and then ship crew and ships away team lose affiliation and become non-aligned. Seems like a strange ability, but you can use that offensively. You play it on an opponent's ship, and then it becomes non-aligned, meaning with non-aligned guys, they no longer have the affiliation that they need to attempt their missions. So Federation guys that are no longer Federation cannot attempt Federation missions. So that's a way to kind of lock people out of doing the stuff they wanted to do. So there are some sneaky decks that you can build with this card. But other than that, I haven't seen any of these cards make a meaningful impact.
Like Michelle Forbes, Ensign Rowe, she has a card in the Premier set, and she has which isn't very powerful, but she has a much better card in, is it Blaze of Glory? When
Yes.
you get her Bajoran marquee counterpart. And Conundrum, the episode this image is taken from, is one of my favorites from TNG, so that's always good to see. And plus Ferengi Trading Outpost is another card like the Husnok Outpost that we mentioned in our previous video, whereby this is not an image taken from screen, but an image created and with a Marauder class ship photoshopped into it to go along. So it's nice to see, which is not just interesting to see these sort of images created by the team for the game.
Yeah, one thing to note about the trading post is also something else that helps you in seed decks. It allows you to seed one universal Decra class ship there, similar to the Husnok Outpost, which also allows you to seed a ship there. So these are ways that you can jumpstart your deck. It takes a little bit of the random element of drawing into a ship out of the game, similar to what OTSD had with the Space Storm, that also allows you to get a ship out early.
Another thing I see in this set is that it's frequently commented that when it comes to Premier, the missions were remarkably easy to solve with just one or two skills before the skill creep that was happening. And there's often complaints that, especially say Bajoran and Cardassian missions are much more complex, and Dominion missions to solve. In this set, we see missions which have 5 affiliations which can attempt them. So that's quite uncommon there. And they are relatively simple compared to the more complex Bajoran and Cardassian missions from the DS9 set.
Awesome. Our next set is Enhanced First Contact. And these are definitely not easy to find these days. Let's get this correctly set to microphone. There were 4 different boxes that came out with this. Each box had a different counterpart from a different affiliation. So we had Barial of Borg, Dukat of Borg, Gowron of Borg, and Tomalak of Borg. This gave the counterpart functionality to all of the other affiliations that were in the game at the time these came out, and really enhanced the ability to play your Borg faction against whoever you were up against. These came with 4 first contact packs, and I believe 3 custom cards, 3 premium cards. These in that cellophane pack in the front.
So this is halfway between like an expansion pack and a cellophane pack by our definition, in that you knew which of the Borg cards you were getting at the front, but you didn't know which 3 other cards you were getting behind it. So
right,
there's what, 8 other cards in the set,
and the Borg overlays came in this
and the
set
Borg
as well.
overlays, which was also randomized. So you needed, typically you're looking at either a box, a 12 deck box would probably get you all of them, but that's the statistical chance.
A 12 deck box got you real close to 2 sets. You normally needed 5 to 6 of these to get a set. It wasn't terrible in the randomization in my experience. I did open my way to several sets of these back when they weren't ridiculously expensive. And the distribution wasn't awful on these. You could get a good chunk of 2 sets in 8 of the packs. So 2 sets of the Borg cards.
Cost-wise, finding a sealed box of 12 decks you're looking at now like a fifth of a paycheck. Those have gotten quite expensive. Individual boxes also have a fairly decent cost, because while there is some value in the off-board cards and some of the other cards included, they do come with 4 packs of First Contact, which is becoming rarer and rarer. So there's guaranteed decent value in just these sealed packs of First Contact, as well as demand for many of the cards in the cellophane wrapped insert, which contains the off-board cards and the additional random selection of additional cards beyond that.
At the risk of hyping up the First Contact packs, I know Johannes and all of you really had mentioned that you can still actually use, well, you can use unopened First Contact packs in gameplay, which was just one of the most mind-boggling, interesting pieces of information I learned from all of you in this video series.
I've kept a rough headcanon, and I think there's only 3 things I've known about this game that Dan didn't know, one of which being the cellophane wraps of the second anthology. So whenever you find out something new like that, it's always really fun.
Absolutely. And it's part of why most of the players, or at least most of the collector players that I know, have a small stack of First Contact packs sitting somewhere that aren't for sale, that aren't on the inventory. They're in the, well, this would be fun to do. Now, that I don't know how often that actually shows up in a tournament, but that definitely shows up in the, we're going to play this for fun and have extra packs. So what do you see?
We Are the Borg is today the big card, especially since in the virtual era, a new variety of the Borg Queen has come out that allows you to download this twice per game, so you can actually use both functions. So the one where you download 2 drones and the one that plays on table. So that is a card that makes many Borg decks go. Borg decks can be relatively slow in the virtual era. There are a couple of ways to get them going relatively quickly. Other than that, of all the counterparts, Bareil of Borg is the one that, in my experience, you see the least of. Dukat of Borg likewise isn't seen a lot. Tomalak sees significantly more play, but Gowron of Borg is really the one you're looking at, simply because Bareil and Dukat don't really have a meaningful special ability. Your weapons and shields are boosted against their former affiliation. Tomalak of Borg also has a rather unimportant ability for Borg. All your ships have cloaking device, which is mostly important when you try to hide from battle, which Borg don't tend to do. So it's really Gowron of Borg's ability that once per game, he allows you to simply initiate battle that makes him the counterpart of choice for most people. Because usually Borg need a specific objective that allows them to do something that other affiliations simply can't do because the rules allow them to do so. And with Gowron of Borg, you have this once per game, I can simply go over and just mess with you. And then he has a homeworld that sees a fair amount of play. It's not uncommon to come up against a Klingon opponent where you then double the Klingon headquarters and then you can try to assimilate it. So of all the counterparts, he is the one you're looking at. And then the other cards at distinctiveness, we have mentioned this one, not necessarily because it allows you to open a sealed First Contact expansion pack. As said, I've only know this one story, but it also gives Borg extra points. And we know that Borg don't normally score bonus points like other affiliations can do. They are tied to their Borg objectives. And this one here actually says that you may score points. And this is something that can put some of the Borg decks in a better position. Population 9 billion of Borg allows you to score double points on certain objectives. So that's a card that you find in some Borg decks. And the other card of interest here is the 11 or 17 drone, because that can be seeded and it nullifies computer crash cards in play. One of the Borg strengths is that they have a very good access to their deck. Basically, whatever is in your deck, you can download with Borg at some point. board players usually need to know the decks really well to know which drone has which ability and which card you want to download in which situation. So that's one of the reasons why it's not a beginner-friendly affiliation. And this card is sometimes used because Borg cannot really allow their download infrastructure to be attacked with computer crashes. So that's one way to help them in that respect.
Johannes, can you speak a little bit about what the overlay cards are and how they work?
People should forget they exist, in my opinion. I think this is maybe an unpopular opinion. I think they make everything worse. I think they don't have gameplay value at all. They don't have a collector's number. I know people collect them like some people collect other things. In game, I don't find them useful because you have to put them in front of your cards. First of all, you need a lot of them in order to use them in a meaningful way. You don't know what personnel you're going to assimilate, so you better bring a dozen blue ones, a dozen green ones, a dozen red ones in order to make sure you're covered, because there's no way going only half the way with these things. Then you have to put them into a sleeve, meaning these cards will be thicker, meaning random selections will no longer be entirely random if you see that or if you can feel that there is a difference. So that can be annoying. It takes time away from the game when you re-sleeve everything. You risk damaging the cards if that is at all important to you. And most importantly, they don't do their job properly because there are personal cards whose template simply doesn't fit these cards anymore. Later on, we have personal with 3-line game text boxes, and you will then just cut out part of the relevant game text. So they are actually not helpful in that respect. I love the idea. I think it's very cool. I have never anybody seen that actually uses these cards, not even dedicated Borg players who love Borg with all their heart. I've never seen anybody use these because in practice, they haven't turned out to be particularly useful in my experience.
So what do you do then when something gets assimilated? What's your preference?
Just take the card and put them in your deck. You leave them in your opponent's sleeves. You just use them. If there is a random selection, you just try and proxy with different cards, or you shuffle the cards, put them under the desk, and then let your opponent name a number. You say, I have a stack of 12 personnel, name 3 of them, and then they say 4, 5, and 6 from the top, and then you just reveal what they have randomly selected. And as far as the skills and skill changes and everything and attribute changes are concerned, it's really not that complicated, and the Borg player will know what they do. This icon becomes a red one, this icon becomes a green one, this, if there's no icon like that, it becomes the other color, and then these are the attributes that go with it. You can always look it up if your opponent doesn't believe you, but this is probably much quicker than trying to make sure that you have the right overlay for the right person, and I think that just slows the game down unnecessarily.
So again, I'm a noob trying to understand this concept. So you're saying that when something gets assimilated, just from a practical, kind of pragmatic perspective, you just take their card onto your side of the table, and it's just kind of known that that card is assimilated, and you can tell that you're using it because it's on your side of the table now? Yeah.
In practice, that works. So players usually have a very good memory of what's going on their side of the table, and often ignore what's going on the other side. But they usually know pretty well what's going on.
Okay.
What you're saying makes sense because the We Are the Borg card has about 5 times the value of almost any other card in this set because of its incredible use. And also when it comes to collectors looking to get mint condition overlays, they're one of the hardest ones to do that for because, as you say, taking cards in and out tends to scuff them up, or they won't be placed in their own sleeve for play sometimes because they're already a sleeve around a card. And so as a result, when people have opened these packs, who wouldn't want to just put a few cards in there to see what it looks like over the top, and that can cause damage to it.
As someone who's opened them, they actually scuff in the cellophane pretty effectively.
Yeah.
You're not going to get a clean card unless someone basically has a box that hasn't been shaken in transit,
And
which
then also,
doesn't happen.
we mentioned the staffing icons. So with the overlays, there's the staffing icon that you see in the of-board cards here, where they have the blue, the green, and the red. And then there are overlays which have just the blue, just the green, and just the red. So of course, the one that has all three just has greater value for its greater utility.
This set also is the worst offender on the promo cards for the varnish bubbling issue. And so it is extremely difficult to find clean, good varnish, enhanced first contact promo cards. Especially 20 years later, a lot of the cards that you'll see look like they've had a fine mist of water beat up on the top of them. And almost only on the top. The back is normally fine. But that, when you have people who are picky about that, that is a manufacturing issue, not something that the player has done to the card. But it can be extremely difficult to find ones that were printed with the right varnish. I don't know exactly what was done wrong, but printed and still have good varnish on.
I also want to give credit where credit is due to the Decipher team for photoshopping these off-board cards, because they didn't get the actors in the makeup and yet they look remarkably good for what they are. So this is artificially created Borg-looking cards, which overall, apart from Ducat's eyepiece, everything else actually looks pretty good on these cards. So full credit to them for making those for us.
Shall we move on to second anthology?
Or is it Armada? Is that before or after?
After.
After.
So second anthology is our second big box anthology set. Like we talked about earlier, it came with a variety of extra packs and 2 starter deck 2s, and 6 promo cards. Those promo cards, whoop, that's upside down. Those promo cards ended up in a single cellophane wrap. And like the first anthology cards, come with each of them on the front. I have 5 of the 6 in front of me. All of these are boosts to existing factions at this point, because we're deep past Deep Space Nine and Dominion being released. And they're kind of fun cards, and a lot of these are sort of progressions of the persona on there. There's something from second or third season, or from when that character gets a promotion, which is a lot of fun. As a collector, I absolutely enjoy having as many of these as I can find, and they're really fun ones to get signed. It also introduces Section 31, and I believe it introduces the no, it doesn't. It's got a infiltrator, but it doesn't introduce that icon.
So as Dan mentioned, you can find 6 different packs of these, the different ones at the front. The one I found the most rare is Vedic Dax. She's definitely the hardest one I seem to obtain.
The one I'm missing.
Yep, exactly. One of the reasons I know this was that I was working in exchange with someone in Europe who wanted to get a bunch of stuff from Hills so he could distribute it to his friends over there. And so I went on to Hills, and I think I ordered 30 of these inserts.
Wow.
And I got 1 Vedic Dax from that purchase of 30 of those packs. And that's the one he needed for his sealed collection as well. So I think that's something that, they gave me a reasonable distribution of the others, but that's definitely the hardest one to find. They're all pretty fun cards. They all have a decent number of skills. They're all often, not all, but many of them, as you say, are personas. And really, though, when it comes to value, as we mentioned in the first anthology video, you can pick up these inserts relatively cheaply. The value of the second anthology box is the DS9, Dominion, and First Contact packs inside. And especially if you get the 2000 dated starter deck 2s, then those are about 5 times the value of the 1998 starter deck 2 cards as well. So that's where the value for the second anthology pack is.
I definitely noticed that the first anthology promos, the 6, were so much harder to find and get than the second anthology. So Tom, are you saying that you think the reason is because the values are so unevenly distributed with those DS9 and Dominion packs, or is there some other reason why getting those second edition folks is so much easier than the first edition anthology folks?
I suspect that's a production run thing. I'm just saying that when it comes to value of the overall sealed box, So that's why I suspect that this first anthology probably didn't print as many inserts as they did for this.
The first anthology cards are also mostly preview cards, stuff we see in future sets. We don't see any of the second anthology cards in future sets. This is the only place they exist.
Anything, Johannes, from a player perspective, or anything else to add about second anthology?
I found it interesting that Tom said that Vedic Dex seems to be the one that is most asked for, commands the highest price. It's also the one that sees most play. What do you guys think? Which one of these is the one that doesn't see a lot of play?
I always have leftover Bashir founders when I bought my stack of 30 and kept some. He's always the last one to go. So Vedic Dax is in the sealed pack with Vedic Dax at the front is in the highest demand, typically followed by, I would say, Luther Sloan, followed by Leggett Demar, followed by Koval, followed by Judd Moss, followed by Bashir Founder.
So Judd Moss is actually the one that almost sees no play at all. He doesn't bring a lot that Klingons don't have, I think. Navigation, honor, officer, and good attributes, especially strength, is not something that Klingons need. Vedic Dex is interesting because she doesn't have a special ability, but she plays for free to the Bajoran headquarters, and she has a lot of skills that you don't find on a lot of Bajorans. She has a lot of those scientific skills, whereas many Bajorans that were featured on the show were more in the social skills department, like diplomacy, honor, and stuff like that, but she has very good scientific skills there. Leggett Damar is also a card that plays for free to his affiliations headquarters and has a download of a card that interacts with that headquarters. He can be downloaded with going to the top with Defend Homeworld, a very good skill set all around. So he's great. And Bashir Founder is good if you play a deck that centers around Founder, not the Jemadar heavy Dominion decks, but rather ones that try and put all the founders in play. And of course, his special ability is one of them, my opinion, one of the most fun special abilities in the game, that if you have a greedy opponent who amasses a huge fleet, then you can bring out Bashir Founder and special download Supernova and just make everything go away there. So I have actually seen people when this new play engine for DS9 came out in the virtual era that allows you to play the Alpha Quadrant Alliance, where you have Federation and Bajoran and Klingons and Romulans together, and that allows you to play a ship with personnel each turn, that people have actually tagged in Bashir Founder as a counter to these people who then put out a lot of ships and leave them at one location together so they can attack them. So it's a niche ability, but certainly an impactful one. And Luther Sloan has also a great ability because he may report anywhere. And this is sometimes underestimated, how anywhere can be, because he can show up, for example, at a location where people wanted to process ore to set up a draw engine and stuff like that, or if you're playing in the Alpha Quadrant and your opponent is playing in the Delta Quadrant and they do stuff there, and you just need to get the personnel opposed in order to shut down certain game text or something like that, then he can do that. If people have played a transport inhibitor to prevent you from beaming down to a planet, Luther Sloan may report there anyway. It's not beaming, he just steps out from behind some rock, I imagine, and then he's there. And so it's really a fun ability there.
Very cool.
The Federation Infiltrator symbol on the Bashir Founder, does this mean I can throw the Bashir Founder in my Federation deck and all is gravy, or do I have to do something complicated that you probably mentioned in our past videos to get that working?
Infiltration is a mess, and I realized that when I played an infiltration deck in a pickup game against another experienced player a couple of weeks ago, we noticed that even going through all the glossary entries, we still couldn't entirely figure out what exactly an infiltrator may and may not do. So some of the wording left us shaking our heads in disbelief that we couldn't figure out exactly how it's supposed to work. I know there are some very good players who run infiltration decks. I haven't been in touch with them to clarify these things. But essentially, this means if you play Dominion and your opponent is playing Federation, then you may also report him to your opponent's side of the table. And then he's working more or less not as your own personal, but rather as somebody who is working with the Federation guys. But in disguise, so your opponent cannot really do anything about it, whereas you have some cards that then target your infiltrator and let you do bad stuff. For example, sneak attack them or force them to attempt a certain mission, even though they don't want to. But it's a rather complicated mechanic and not something I would recommend new players to try before they are more familiar with the game.
Got it. So you can throw Bashir Founder in a Dominion deck and kind of do whatever you want apart from the infiltration, but you certainly cannot throw him in a Federation deck and just act as though he's working with you. Okay, thanks.
Awesome. After second anthology, Decipher did something a little odd, and it included a single card inside of a video game. This card is the USS Jupiter, and she was included in the Star Trek Armada video game. And I've always loved it just because she's wild and rare and harder to find. She's still pretty hard to find cheap. And but yeah, strange, wonderful, completely CG image. I don't believe that she was actually pictured in I don't believe an Akira class ship was actually pictured until First Contact, and it was just a fleeting image. So I think this is one of the computer models based on what they used to make the model for the movie, but I'm not certain.
Yeah, you're correct. The first time we see Akira is in First Contact, and it was a CG ship there as well. Yeah. I think they used the image from that for the USS Thunderchild in a later set. Also, it has a download of Chain Reaction Pulsar, and Chain Reaction Pulsar is another thing just from the game. So I forget whether it's either Trouble with Tribbles or Mirror Mirror that has that card, and is again, that was fun to see a card in an expansion which came from a video game source. This one holds, as you say, it's not cheap. It's not impossible to find either. It has a special place in my heart, as I remember as a kid, I spent far too much money on Premiere, and when I went off to college, I had to sort of make sure I was shutting down expenditures of things like this. And I remember I bought the Armada video game while in college and not knowing this in there, opened it up, and there was this CCG card, and I was worried my instinct to collect would take over. So I remember for some reason thinking the best solution to this would be to take that insert and put it in the trash can, because if I let myself keep it, I'd want to collect stuff around it. But the ghost of Star Trek Cards Past must have come to me in the night, because I woke up at 3 a.m. in a sweat, went over, dug it out, shoved it back in the box, and did my best to forget about it, because I would have felt too bad had I emptied the bin the next day. So this card, I did buy an additional one for a sealed display on my shelf, but I still have my original tucked away in my Star Trek Armada game box.
Awesome.
I rescued it from a terrible fate.
Recently, the producers of Armada did a port and actually updated the game so it plays on modern computers. So I will admit I have recently replayed all of the campaign and will play my multiplayer games of that every so often. And it's quite a fun, nostalgic way to burn an hour or two.
You see the ship at all in play, Johannes?
I've never seen it in play, and I find exactly 4 deck lists that actually have used it in the past. What is it? In the past 12 years, so not a very popular ship. The tactic it downloads, on the other hand, is seen in about 10 times more decks. So this ship doesn't do anything that the USS Enterprise from Premier doesn't do. It has 988, the Enterprise has 989, and the holodeck and tractor beam is also something that you find on the Enterprise, and the download of Chain Reaction Pulsar usually doesn't matter much, because as a Federation player, you are not the one who's looking for battle. It can be used offensively. Chain Direction Pulsar, I believe, has attack bonus of 5, so a significant bonus. So if you play the one interrupt that forces you to attack on your Federation guys, to make your peaceful guys attack the opponent, so the old trick where you force yourself to attack, then I guess you can play a deck that gets weapons up or attack total up quite a bit, but it's not a card that I think you can build a deck around. Maybe a nice addition if you need another ship in your deck, but not something that that put the game into an unbalanced state, because that was only available in that video game. I think I only got this card 3 or 4 years ago as prize support at some point, but I was happy without it just as well.
It does have a matching commander, which is nice, but again, it's not big enough to be super exciting. It also, so most of the Jupiters out there came out of the Star Trek Armada game. It does feature as one of the promo cards that you can find in All Good Things. And those cards are indistinguishable. They are still sealed in the single cellophane pack. So you don't know where you got it unless you happen to be there when you opened said All Good Things. That brings us to Enhanced Premier. Enhanced Premier is, hey, guess what? We got another Premier-like starter deck. These had 4 packs of Premier in them, plus a single dual personnel card, and reimaginings of 15. So I think there were 3 in each pack, but reimaginings of 15 Premier dilemmas or missions. The cool part about those dilemmas or missions is that they were combinations of 2 cards. The dilemmas were things like anaphasic organisms and Nagilum, where it would be both dilemmas you'd have to encounter in sequence on the card. The missions would be, one of those early common white border missions like Investigate Anomaly, and it would either include an outpost for a specific faction as you flipped it over, or it would include one end of a wormhole. So it made those common missions more interesting. The individual cellophane packs are hard to come by. I managed to get mine quite a long time ago. All of these, so there's one of the missions on the back where it's got, you'll be able to see better pictures when Mike throws them up, but it's got the an extra set of text on them. These are also like the enhanced first contacts, where the front card that you could see was set, and then the cards behind it were randomized, and these were more annoyingly randomized. You needed a deeper set to get all of them.
It's also a difference to the enhanced first contact set in that the value of enhanced first contact is primarily in the 4 sealed packs of first contact. 4 sealed packs of Premier does not have great value, but these dual personnel on 1 card do actually have almost all the value in the set. They're not even value either. Typically, the Federation themed cards will have higher value, followed by Sons of Moog, followed by Beverly and Will, and down through Data and Picard into the Troys. And it's also another case of uneven distribution of power, because much like with a Jake and Nog card, when you have these 2 people on 1 card, there's quite a lot more power in there for the extra stats and the extra skills. Federation players can use 5 of these 6 dual personnel cards, and the Klingons are the only ones that have a unique one for them. So in this set, the value comes from these dual personnel cards.
Yeah, anecdotally, I just recently picked up an open set of 6 of these, and I felt very fortunate that I got all the cards except one. One was missing, so I don't know how common it is to get buy 6 and get the whole set, but I felt that was fortunate to only be missing 1.
My experience was similar. I bought 1 of each because I wanted unopened mint dual personnel cards, and I think I was missing 1 or 2 from the others in terms of the randomization.
Yeah. The anecdotes I have is that you'll be missing 2 to 3. So you both did well. Well, how often do we see I'm curious how often you see the dilemmas and missions in particular. I know you'll see some of the crew.
Well, let's start with the crew. They are powerful cards. You don't actually see them too often. You find the Troys a lot. Beverly and Will you find a lot. They have the useful download of the tricorder that can be useful against several dilemmas, medical ×2, diplomacy, navigation. The problem with the Data and Geordie and Data and Picard and Jean-Luc and Beverly card is mostly that they compete with other versions of these characters. And sometimes you want a different Jean-Luc Picard. And that's why you don't necessarily see them that much. The Troys are really good in Ferengi, and Beverly and Will, especially in non-aligned decks or other non-Federation decks, they can be quite good. The dilemmas are spread far apart in power. If you look at something like, where is it, computer weapon and hyper aging, nobody's going to play that. I think you find maybe a dozen, 2 dozen decks in the last 10 years or so that have included that card. Whereas if you look at the Love Scow, Females Love Interest and Garbage Scow, you'll find more than 1,000 decks. That's probably one of the most played dilemmas. The Garbage Scow itself is a very good card. The fact that with this combo dilemma here, you can also seed it at a planet mission makes it so much more versatile. And then the Love Interest is just a bonus. But that is the one big card. And also the Love Interest and Plague Ship. Again, the Plague Ship, powerful dilemma. Yes, it can give the opponent 5 points, but if you manage to weed out all the medical before that, you can kill the entire remaining crew. And with the Love Interest combo here, you can also seed it on a planet mission, which you couldn't before. So these are the 2 big dilemmas here. The others in practice don't matter. As far as the missions are concerned, the wormhole missions are mostly used in in decks that want to mess with their opponent, because they give you an access point to different quadrants if you include them. And the outpost missions, for one, they can save you a seat slot. If you want to play more dilemmas, or if you have a very complicated infrastructure and you want to save the slot for the outpost, you can go to one of these missions. I think they're nicely balanced in that they give you fewer points than the variant without the outpost. And that can make a difference, especially if you look at for example, the test mission 2 for the Feds. That mission is only worth 20 points. So that means you will have to do some more. But you can also run 2 of these. For example, you can run both of the Klingon missions that have an included outpost and then still seed another Klingon outpost, simply to have several locations on the space line where you can deploy your forces. So no matter where your opponent is seeding their outpost, you can spread out your outposts over the entire space line, and you can make sure that you can pop out wherever they decide to set up base. So they also have this offensive use. And of course, the defensive use, that if you yourself are attacked, that you can actually repair your outpost with these mission 2s. If you actually flip them over, it tells you what you have to do in order to bring the outpost back. So that's a nice way of giving you some survivability. Overall, I like this set very much.
As a collector, you've got a stack of 2-sided cards. So a whole bunch of these people needed 2 copies of for their binder. Also diminishing how many of them there were.
I quite like the idea, because many of the premier dilemmas were rendered fairly impotent by the skill creep that we saw, especially by this point in the game. So as a way to reintroduce a familiar card in a nice way, I thought these dual dilemmas were quite fun. But it would have been good to see them put in with a little more thought, and that you would have had maybe like a barrier card followed by a more interesting dilemma to sort of recreate how people seeded dilemmas. Probably would have made them more more useful. But you know, it was nice to see them come back in that way. I never really engaged with the idea of the built-in outpost to the dilemmas specifically. I quite liked having the separate outpost, but I can see how especially the wormhole would be useful. The personnel cards are they're just kind of nice in a way for their anomalous nature. But I hadn't thought at all about the concept of if you had one, you couldn't use two separate personalities for the same characters. I suppose the only people that doesn't matter for is Data and Picard, because no Romulan player is going to have a Data or Picard to clash with that.
And Johannes, the gameplay piece here, how do these dilemmas work? Maybe you explained it and I missed it, but you put like one's planet, one space, you put it under a mission. You basically the away team has to face both, or they just face the ones that are relevant to the mission.
So the computer weapon and hyper aging, for example, it seeds like one card, so it only counts as one card towards your 30 card seed deck, but it gives you the effect of two dilemmas, two relatively weak dilemmas. And then since they are all planet space dilemmas, you can see them wherever and both cards will apply. And then you have to go through them one by one. First, you go through the computer weapon, you follow the entire text. And once that is done, you go to the hyper aging and then follow that text.
Awesome. Wow. And how about the dual personnel? I'm looking at Beverly and Will. You see Beverly's skills separate from Will's. How does that work? They count as two people with one card? You get them both?
Dual personal rules are notoriously difficult for people to grasp because they are not always intuitive. So essentially, they are two characters on one card. So Beverly, as you said, has her own skills, her own attributes. Sometimes people just look at them as two characters that just happen to walk together all the time on the same card. So one of the rules of thumb that is used is what happens to one character, the other then just rides along. So if Beverly is randomly selected to be stopped, will automatically be stopped. So in practice, you usually just select the cards. And there are some, so the cards, not the individual personnel. There are some cards where it makes it a bit tricky. For example, if you have a card that says, count the total number of the personnel in the away team, half of those personnel are killed. So then the first question will be, well, are these two personnel then, or is it just one personnel? And there are also other cards that let you download stuff. For example, there are cards that let you download one of those personnel, but not the other. In this case, usually if you can download, for example, Beverly with some card, then that allows you to drag Will along. So if you look at the glossary section, some things will become clear, but don't be surprised if you don't understand everything at once. It took me a long time, and as far as I've heard, there are talks of trying to rewrite those rules or streamlining them, or at least rephrasing them in order to make it easier for people to understand. It's always difficult. You have the one camp that says we should leave stuff as we've known it, and others say no, just make it easier for people to understand. So whatever you do, or whatever those people who run the game now do, they will do it wrong.
Well, for me, there's a comfort in familiarity, and just to hear that the complexity of the rule creep kind of complexity from the boosters we opened is kind of consistent with some complexity creep here in the boutique sets. Seems pretty congruent to me. This sounds like a natural place to segue into the third portion of our promotional cards.